Well, hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar, Beyond the Binder, Digital Management of Food Safety. I'm Adrienne Bloom, Editorial Director of Food Safety Magazine, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. So thanks for joining us. Now, today's presenters are Andrew Thomson, Director at Think ST Solutions, Dr. Matthew Wilson, Senior Lecturer at the University of Adelaide, and also Dr. Ben Chapman, Department Head and Professor at North Carolina State University. So I'll rejoin our presenters at the end to help answer your questions that come in throughout the webinar. So don't forget to submit those using the Q&A and chat section of the webinar console. Also, today's event is being recorded and it'll be archived on food-safety.com.
In the brief time that we have together, I'd like to set the scene for today's webinar session. We all understand that food safety is a dynamic and ever-evolving field, but unfortunately, food safety incidents continue to repeat themselves over time. The rapid advancement of digital technologies is changing the way we work and how we manage risk. A few years ago, Microsoft released this quote regarding the changing nature of work. What struck a chord with me was the last line. Companies need to rethink everything from culture and tools to the environment we create. And that's exactly what we need to do in food safety. So today I'll revisit a few key ideas to ensure that we're all aligned, asking the right questions and focused on what truly matters most. When HACCP was first introduced, it was transformative for its time. But you'll all agree with me that that was a different era. Back then, using pen and paper systems for documenting hazards and control measures certainly made good sense. But with the pace of change, the increasing complexity of risks in all food operations across the supply chain, we need to do better and we need to think about different approaches. What the food industry now needs are systems that don't just record data. We need systems that help us respond, track trends, and reduce risk in real time. So despite rising expectations around the globe, many food businesses still rely on paper-based logs and clipboards and visual checks as their primary verification tools. These methods, as I see it, introduce serious vulnerabilities. Missed or backfilled entries, illegible handwriting, lost records at critical moments like in a crisis or at audit. Manual processes are error-prone and just plain inefficient. So for QA and frontline leaders, this isn't just an outdated approach, it's full of risk. Unreliable data also compromises audits, regulatory compliance, and your legal defence if there is a food safety incident. In today's environment, paper-based systems is a real liability. It doesn't add value to your business at all. Collecting data to satisfy audits also doesn't prevent food safety failures. Surprisingly, many food operations here in Australia collect copious amounts of data, but they do nothing with it. So to say, collecting data to satisfy audits doesn't prevent food safety failures. True risk management requires systems that capture accurate data, spot trends, and triggers timely actions. Manual methods certainly can't do this. Data gets buried in binders and there's no way to generate insights. So if you're reacting to events after they've gone wrong, it's too late. To lead in food safety, we must shift from passive compliance to proactive prevention, and that means going digital for strengthening our food safety management systems and maintaining aligned certification schemes and other schemes throughout the food supply chain around the globe. In reviewing a lot of the recent food safety incidents, many of these could have been easily prevented. Digital monitoring provides the early warnings, whereas, as I've pointed out, paper logs don't. Just because everything looks fine on the surface, it doesn't mean that problems aren't forming underneath. You can't fix what you can't see, is the key message here. Digital systems are no longer optional. They're a strategic investment in food safety, operational efficiency, and future readiness. The real cost is not adopting them. With digital tools, you gain real-time visibility, reduced human error, empowered employees, smoother and less stressful audits. But technology alone isn't the answer. Success depends on how you manage this change. So my tips for a successful transition are involving your team early, from IT to the employee on the floor. Identify your internal champions to build trust and momentum. Start small. Choose one site or one process to pilot and then review and act on the results. Set clear goals. That might be fewer missed checks, reduced waste, whatever the case may be. My colleague Justin Strange in the UK has noticed strong uptake of digital systems in the last few years. And certainly in Australia, adoption is growing, but it's unclear if full utilisation is occurring across all sectors of the food supply chain. I suspect, though, that people are collecting data and not reviewing that data to make improvements to their systems. So when you're assessing a digital management system, it must be a good fit for your business. And so some of the key questions I think you should be considering asking any vendor relates to scalability of their system to your business requirements, workflow integration, alerts and responsiveness, and also people and change management. These are key issues that need to be addressed by any food business to ensure that they're getting the right system for their operations. So you can see that this isn't just a technology upgrade, it's a business-wide improvement strategy. And when implemented properly, it means safer food, stronger teams, better decisions, and few surprises. Digital monitoring brings clear benefits when combined with trained teams working with clear procedures. It helps prevent issues before they escalate and makes compliance smoother. The technical must-haves that I believe are important are that devices are suited to your business and operational needs. There is offline data storage with synchronized capability, reliable Wi-Fi and network access, devices that function close together in busy spaces, strong battery life, data backup, and in today's age, a high level of security. So don't be afraid to ask vendors the tough questions before you commit your operation to a digital system. So what leaders and QA professionals should be doing is not just adopting tools, but they're leading that whole change process. This takes more than equipment, it takes people, planning, and accountability. It means also creating a strong site-specific implementation plan that includes practical onboarding for employees, hands-on sessions that build digital confidence, opportunities for employees to ask questions and give feedback, a clear process for how data will be reported, analysed, and acted on. The human side of this transition is critical. If people don't understand the why or feel unsure about the how, adoption will fail, even with the best system. Quality assurance professionals and frontline leadership teams must own the process. That includes not just data collection, but reporting, interpretation, and using insights to improve performance. Some final thoughts. Digital systems are effective as the people who use them and the leaders who champion them. If we want sustained change, we need to invest in more than just tools. We must develop leadership capability at every level. And many leaders in food operations are technically skilled, but don't have the skill sets in how to lead change. They also don't have the skill sets to influence, communicate with purpose with this change process, or build buy-in across teams. To make digital food safety stick, leaders need to be able to translate the why behind the change to frontline teams. They also need to model and reinforce desired behaviours, use data for coaching and not just for compliance, encourage questions and feedback, and manage resistance without reverting to old habits. Shortly, Matt Wilson will speak about the critical human skills that underpin this transition. But we all need to remember that skills development must be intentional. It's not enough to expect our leaders to figure this all out. We need to give them structure, support, and tools to succeed. In wrapping this all up, consider this. Are our leaders equipped to lead digital change? Have we embedded learning and not just technology? And do we measure improvement in both behaviour and compliance? The best digital systems support not just compliance, but culture, capability, and continuous improvement. They also deliver measurable return on investment. The payoff is very real for your business, your people, and your customers. That's the end of my presentation, and I'll pass you over to Matt Wilson. Thanks, Matt.
So thank you very much, Andrew. And I'm going to build straight on to what Andrew was just talking in there around what are the human skills we need. We know how powerful digital tools can be, as Andrew has just highlighted, and Ben will also discuss in a minute as well. But a common conversation that Andrew and I have is around what are the skills that people are going to need to be able to use these systems in the most optimal ways, because many of the skills that professionals in this area will need actually change when we integrate more of these digital tools into our everyday operations. So let's start by thinking about why we're focusing so much on these human skills. Because digital skills, systems, I should say, are definitely able to provide us with more data, more accurate data, more searchable data, in many cases easier to understand data. But we still need to be able to exercise human judgment to be able to best utilize that data and to be able to apply it in a way that actually is going to lead to improved safety outcomes for our business. And in particular, what we require is critical thinking to be able to sort of take the complexity of some of the data that can be generated and make sure that it is actually leading to meaningful change. And this will require teamwork. And so in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit around those teamwork skills, those communication skills, as well as the critical thinking skills that we need to get the most out of these different systems and tools. So what are the human skills that we're focusing on? So as I've already mentioned, critical thinking is very important. Why are we seeing differences? What do they mean? And analysing this, finding the patterns so that we can make good decisions, having the decision-making skills and the power to make those decisions at the right level of the operation as well, so that we can make informed choices quickly, we can minimise any potential damages, and we can sort of focus on the core operations of the business. Having strong communication systems so that we can escalate any concerns clearly but also quickly, and having the problem-solving abilities to be able to fix the root causes so it doesn't happen again. We can at least limit how often it will happen again, rather than just dealing with the symptoms of a potential food safety concern. And lastly, the accountability, taking ownership, acting responsibly, making sure that everyone in the organisation knows who is responsible for what. All of these things I'm going to highlight in the next few minutes. So working through one by one, let's start with critical thinking. So digital tools tend to be very good at spotting things such as inconsistencies, reporting this data, and putting it into a format that can be easily accessed and used. But as human skills, we still need to be able to understand what the system can and can't do so that we can identify risks that the system itself may not capture. But more importantly, we also need the critical thinking power to be able to question why these inconsistencies are occurring so that we can action them and that we can use the other sort of different human skills I'm going to be touching on later to do something about them. And as an educator, more and more our focus is on developing the critical thinking skills of our students. As digital generation, often very good at using these tools, need to also make sure that they are using them responsibly and following on from what they're finding out, which is where we get to that analytical thinking. So we need to be able to spot the trends in the data, but as I said, often digital tools are actually quite good at this themselves. They can tell us if change is occurring. They can even give, in many cases, warning signs. But as humans within the operation, we've got to be able to assess, are these warning signs something of actual significance to the business? Why are they occurring? And if they are repeatedly occurring, we definitely need to be looking at that in depth to find out why, to find out what we might need to do to fix it, and to be able to actually apply that. And as Andrew was mentioning before, in a site-specific or a workstation-specific way. Because data is extremely helpful in terms of decision-making. If you're going to have to go through like an old written record, like Andrew was talking about earlier, it's going to be very hard to sort of find differences in trends, or to compare what's happening now to what's happening last week or even last year. But now we have readier access to that data. How can we use that to make the strong decisions that we need to make to best empower our business? Because often, these are high stress scenarios. If something goes wrong, it can go really wrong. And we need to be able to take fast and confident actions. Do we discard and move on, or do we need to investigate this further? Do we have time to do that in the moment, especially in a high stress situation? Because our priority always has to be keeping safety on track, but obviously that the production and the services must go on as well. And by knowing what to happen in different situations, and by empowering employees to be able to make these decisions, we can minimise the potential drawbacks that might occur. And a key to this is effective communication. When risks occur, or when we highlight that potential risks might be on the horizon, what can we do? What systems are in place within a food business to be able to make sure that those risks are communicated to who they need to go to? We need systems in place that alert risks quickly. And again, digital tools can be excellent at that. If we have known critical control points that are easily measurable by digital tools, often they are excellent in sort of raising that alarm. But we've got to make sure that the people who need that information have access to that, and that the people who might be reading that data, or might be finding out for the first time, know the strategies in place, know the teamwork links needed to be able to pass that on effectively. We don't want ambiguity or inaction. We want to make sure that the whole team knows what's happening, so that the relevant people can step in and exercise problem solving and the other skills that we've been highlighting. Because dependability builds trust. To have a well-integrated system, we need reliable data, we need timely data, we need a process in place so that if we do receive alerts, especially on a consistent basis, we are exercising the corrective actions, and that we have something that, if we have an alarm that's going off every day that people know, doesn't really mean much, we can become complacent. We've got to make sure that we have trustworthy systems where appropriate risks are taken seriously, and we're not too caught up in producing data that's no longer meaningful, or receiving potential sort of hazard risks that we know aren't of concern in straight away. And instead, we've got to make sure that employees are empowered to be able to identify what is important, and not to become complacent just because a digital tool is there and it's giving them the information that they think they want. Digital systems, as I said, very good at highlighting the problems but then as a company, the people in the company need to solve them. And often this will involve bringing the team together, having a system in place so that, as I said, the alert can come to the different branches of the team that might be able to solve it together. But also it's important that we document what corrective action has taken place, that we monitor that we follow that up, and that we make sure that, yes, that was a lasting corrective action, or no, that was just a short-term fix. And a lot of this just comes down to trust. Obviously, we need to trust the data. We don't want sort of random number generators in our facility where we're not relying on that, or we're just ignoring that, or we're like, oh, yeah, we know that machine doesn't work, so we're not relying on that. We need to make sure that the data is trustworthy and is producing things that we can rely on. We also need trust in each other. We need to know that our colleagues are doing the right thing, that leadership is supportive and is going to sort of not be accountable, as we'll discuss in a minute. Transparency is very important. Another powerful thing about digital tools is that many people can access that data if it's relevant to them, and can look back and can look for trends together. Because without the trust, the systems are not preventative. They are just giving us information that we're not effectively using, or not using as effectively as we could. And a key skill as an educator that I'm looking to build with all our students is around adaptability. The skills that you might need now working in food safety in a food company are probably quite different to the ones 10 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. As we're seeing, improved tools that are becoming more affordable, more adaptable to different industries, we're also seeing, more people having to use these tools to achieve the food safety outcomes that they want. That could involve building digital literacy of employees so they understand what the data is, how to access the relevant information, how to adapt it for their business. As businesses change, very few businesses sort of stay still. They often new product developments, new production methods, new client expectations. We need to make sure that our systems are being updated to cope with those changes. And when things do go wrong, we need to be able to find out why, to change things and to improve our performance, to limit that from happening again. And a lot of this comes down to accountability. Within a food operation, sometimes things might go wrong, but it's important that when that does happen, that people take ownership. It's not just passing the blame, that people are encouraged to report things truthfully. If something is going wrong, that is addressed rather than covered up or just tick the box, and that people take action when systems fail. And on that note, I do have a quick poll, so I'll give you a minute or so to answer this question. Are your team members confident in making a decision when something goes wrong, or do they just log it and move on? So I'd just like you to answer yes, I'm confident they would make a good decision, or no, they are likely to just log it and move on. So we can see there that luckily the majority of people are confident that yes, team members would make a good decision, and that is very reassuring to know. But equally, there are too many, unfortunately, in that box of no, they are likely to just log it and move on, and that comes down to culture. Part of a successful team is having the culture where people are both empowered to make a good decision, but also encouraged that regardless of the consequences, that is the right thing to do, especially in such a high-risk situation as food safety. And this comes down to leadership as well. Leaders within the group must demonstrate positive engagement with digital systems, must empower employees to use them successfully. And as Andrew was suggesting before, we need to coach teams, build confidence and skills. If people are improving, we should acknowledge that, reward that, encourage them to do the best that they can. And within the whole organisation, make sure that food safety is something that's visibly observed to be important to the leadership, so that everyone in the company knows that is a priority, and that any sort of observations or changes that they are highlighting will be taken seriously and acted on. And yes, as the cliche goes, teamwork makes the dream work. By engaging a whole team, production becomes more collaborative and responsibility is shared, and people are more likely to both review, act, and make good decisions around the data from these digital tools. And this leads really critically to an important food safety culture within an organisation, so that everyone understands their responsibilities, and that will lead to the best outcome. So I'm now very excited to hand over to Ben to hear about what some of these different food digital tools might involve.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm really happy to be here today, and we'll take the next 10 or 15 minutes to talk through a little bit on, I guess, two things. One, to talk a little bit about a process and a report that was written as part of the Conference for Food Protection here in the U.S. It's a group that gets together every 2 years to provide recommendations to FDA on retail and food service food safety as it relates to the food code. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a committee that I co-chaired around digital food safety management systems. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about an example from real life and some of the work that we've been doing here in my group and at NC State in this avenue. So Andrew and Matt really talked quite a bit about this, and I'm always excited to see when three individual presenters kind of arrive at similar spots on the utility and really answering the question, why would you even use digital food safety systems? And I think Andrew did just a great job talking about cost of the system, and Matt highlighted trust in being able to verify data. It's really to me all about this like increased and enhanced data collection about things that are happening within a system at all times. And I'm going to talk to you from the perspective as someone who works with restaurants and retail stores, largely not in food manufacturing, and where I think the situation is a little bit different, but the utility is still there. It's that we're constantly measuring lots and lots of different things, whether it's part of a preventive controls plan, a HACCP plan, whatever. But we're not always thinking about those measurements as data points that have the ability to elicit trends. And I think Matt did a really great job talking about the need for human interaction with data. But for me, that's a huge deal, is that we're, if I think about data that's being collected currently about temperature on cooling or on hot holding or storage or even on hand washing, we think about it as certain points. And if we're able to look across the course of one site and 1 year, or multiple sites in 1 month, to be able to look for commonalities in the trends, that is something that we absolutely cannot do with a paper-based system. And so, I think for the use side of things, there's so much more utility in a digital food safety system. It's not just compliance, but it allows us to dive deeper into it. And then there are these other cost savings and trustworthiness of the data that's there. I won't be redundant too much with what the other presenters talked about, but that's a huge deal. The other thing that I want to highlight is that FDA here in the U.S. has done a series of risk factor studies for different food service and retail settings, and from their results, they highlight robust management systems are really, really important when it comes to less non-compliance issues or less risk factors. And so that piece, I think is also a good foundation for us. It's not just, hey, this is nice, we can look at trends, but also it impacts the likelihood of having problems within a food setting, and I think that's really, really key for us. So as I mentioned before, and when Adrian invited me to speak on this, I chaired a committee that met over the course of 2 years to make recommendations to FDA about how to use digital food safety management systems, and what are they, and what are the definitions, and how do we identify best practices. And so we looked at a variety. We had a committee of it was almost 40 individuals. You can see the breakdown here on my slide. 11 industry members, 7 regulatory members, a consumer member, an academic member, and then 15 other folks that came from a wide variety of service providers or industry representatives, as well as input from FDA, CDC, and USDA. So this was a pretty big undertaking. And we were charged with identifying these best practices, looking at existing guidance documents and any research out there, and then developing a guidance document for establishments. And so we did that. It was published on the Conference for Food Protection's website back in 2023. You can see a screenshot of this here. I looked today, and it appears that the Conference for Food Protection's website is down when it comes to reports. So unfortunately, they're not there. The report isn't there now, but I will tell you what's in it, and I hope it'll be back there if you Google that in the next couple of days. Our key points that we really highlighted is that we know that research dictates using some sort of food safety management systems reduces risk factors, as I mentioned before. Being able to digitally manage temperature provides a whole bunch of cost savings, but have to make sure, things that we kind of highlighted within the report is how you select a system and having different sensors and different things, even if it's different user inputs. There are so many different platforms, as well as I would say solutions out there on the market right now that whatever someone's looking for is probably out there. Having systems talk to each other with existing management programs and apps is still, I think, a challenge, where you may have a hand washing sensor and temperature monitoring sensors that have technical APIs that push information out, but they may not always talk to each other in a dashboard. And I think that's an area that we talked about in the report as necessary. The gold, I wouldn't even say the gold standard. The thing that we would that would be ideal if we got to this point is that it's a plug and play system where people are utilizing different technology, and then it goes into some sort of dashboard that someone can see their entire site or their entire geographic location if they're a regional manager or director, or an entire chain, and be able to look at this information in somewhat real time. That's really sort of best practice, but it comes from selecting the right system and that having those systems talk to each other. We also made a recommendation that things be implemented in a phased approach to be able to jump right into the world of digital food safety management and go like 100% in. It has a lot of pitfalls. And so to be able to build pieces, to maybe start with temperature and then move into hand washing and move into food safety culture, utilize digital food safety management for training needs, thinking about these things as modules, that's really what we suggested. We also talked in this report about data management and the need for having secure data that's trusted, that doesn't is not can't be acquired by others for nefarious reasons, but also you have, and Matt just talked about this, you have this level of trust within the system. What you're looking at is what's actually happening. And so engaging with IT professionals on data management and data cleaning is really, really important. Another aspect that we highlighted in the report was the need for training for individuals. And again, Matt, I think, really did a great job highlighting this as well in his comments. But this idea of, you can build a great system, but if no one knows how to use it, it's not very helpful. And there are lots of times in the last, I would say 5 years, maybe longer, that I've been out in a business who's using some level of a food safety management system where someone says to me, we're not using it to its full capacity. We're only using it for X, but we know it can do Y. And to me, that is a real indication of a lack of training or capacity to utilize systems to their fullness. And so we made recommendations related to training and ongoing improvement. We also talked about the importance of regulators being aware of and being comfortable, essentially, with digital food safety management systems. And to give you an example, I know that I've encountered regulatory bodies who may, if there is a problem with cooling, for instance, may require someone to do written cooling logs for X amount of time as a way to demonstrate that they can manage the issue that they had from a non-compliance. And to me, that there's an easier way to do that, utilizing a temperature sensor, a handheld wand, some sort of data logger that allows for someone to cool and walk away and not have to track at certain intervals. And doing all the things that Andrew highlighted as being challenging. But I do think that is part of the issue is really related to the comfortability of regulators in this space. And then, one of the last sort of bullets that I'll highlight that we talked about in the report as well was this idea of oversight and enforcement and thinking of a world where there may be a handshake of, instead of my normal public health inspection that's going to happen, or environmental health officer is going to come in and take a look at my restaurant and they're going to spend an hour and a half. If I could just unlock data for them and have them look at what we've been doing and where we have corrective actions, and then jump into what they see and observe, that to me provides the potential for a much richer and more meaningful inspection visit. And I think you could see that also happen for those who are familiar with third-party audits or second-party audits, that kind of document review happens if we had the ability to open up a digital food safety management system and have someone kind of noodle around and see what they want to see and then dive in deeper. I just think that, and not just me, but the committee felt that has the ability to lead to much more in-depth and fruitful visits where it's not just focused on what someone sees, but they're really working on food safety solutions with individuals. So that was kind of how I got into the world of digital food safety management. I also want to call out that I have worked with a couple of folks on this issue. A colleague of mine, Eric Moore, who's at Testo, as well as doing some work with Yum Brands over the past couple of years, looking at things that pop up. And this really like builds on some of the stuff that Matt talked about, where to have a good digital food safety management system, you have to have good people, and people have to be able to respond to things, and they have to understand what it means when they're alerted. I got into research in this world by actually tracking the differences between logging information by hand with pens and paper versus digital automatic management of temperatures, and being able to track just the lost productivity aspect and even the potential for mistakes. Then got into another real world example that came up around alarms and the potential for fatigue. And so I had an experience with a local restaurant here in North Carolina, where I was doing some work with the owner operator, walked in and heard an alarm going off. Essentially, kitchen staff weren't doing anything. It was coming from one of the walk-in coolers. The door I could see was propped. The alarm was due to temperature abuse, and the elevated temperatures within the walk-in. But there's just fatigue with the alarm. Essentially, and what I mean by that is, no one was hearing it, no one, because it was always going off. So there was nothing to respond to, because there was always an emergency. And so to me, that's the next sort of step for integrating digital food safety management systems. Is there are thresholds and alarms that'll get set on a variety of different things, and then being able to understand where and when is best to set those thresholds. Our study was really about this idea of like signal overload and desensitized responses. And when that happens, then the entire system breaks down, because why would you even bother monitoring temperature if the alarm doesn't create the need to do something? And so that was really the partnership of the project, was to investigate these things. So what we did to do this was to really help companies try to better understand where they set thresholds on alarms, and implement a digital food safety management system to get into the nuance of some of the stuff that Matt talked about, on being able to better understand when you should have an action. And so we did this in kind of a rudimentary way, where we track temperatures in a commercial reach-in, where we had digital food safety management system probes that were stuck into different foods. We had probes that were in the reach-in, and then we cut the power out to simulate power outage. We also had a situation where we had the refrigerator door was left ajar for 4 hours, and then mimicking what it looks like in a kitchen where there's frequent operating events. And so what I, had we not been using some sort of digital management system with temperature monitoring, we're, constantly, if you wanted to figure out what the best way to do this is, you might be looking at what the ambient temperature is within the reach-in, and then you're tracking that, doing this all by paper. What we were able to do is, and I'll share this on the next slide here, is get a breakdown of what the temperatures look like in different products at different times over the course of our experiment. And so to me, this is the value of a digital food safety management system, because I can do this in my laboratory. We have a kitchen here at NC State where we do a lot of commercial work like this. I can do this, but having a digital food safety management system on site allows somebody to also look at data in the exact same way that I did, to be able to set where the right alarm time is. And so again, this is kind of what outputs look like, but I will spread out the data a little bit to give you a sense of the stuff that we saw that we wouldn't have seen in a normal situation, where if we were tracking just the ambient temperature of the reach-in, we would see, and this is what you're seeing here is a power outage, we would see that the temperature spikes in that ambient, but it doesn't spike as quickly in products. And in fact, over the course of a number of hours, the product gets much, much closer to the temperature. But when the power comes back on and the temperature of the ambient temperature of the reach-in drops, it takes much longer for the product to drop. And again, I can get into lots of details about alarm fatigue and everything like that. But to me, this is the power of a digital food safety management system that incorporates a whole bunch of different sensors. Is I am much more interested in, the regulatory body is much more interested in what's happening in the product, not in the ambient temperature. And so to be able to have to do that manually is essentially impossible. So to be able to track this over time, to help set thresholds, to better understand when a power outage goes out, what I have to do with product, is extremely powerful, for me, and it's something that I know many of my colleagues in industry have been really interested in. For us, a big key takeaway of utilizing a digital food safety management system like this is short-term ambient increases don't always mean product danger, because we took the same data, ran it into a pathogen growth modeling program, and we're able to demonstrate from models that maybe I don't really need to set an alarm in this specific example at 5 minutes after the ambient temperature goes up, but we're really talking about hours, maybe an hour, 2 hours, or 4 hours before I really have to do something. But again, without measuring this digitally, we wouldn't be able to do that because you need to know both time and temperature over the course of an event. We used product simulation sensors as well. I would say that those are really key tools in digital food safety management. So you're not looking at 30 different probes, but you're utilizing some machine learning algorithms to be able to drive information. For me, this is such a huge help in an area that I would love to for more people to know about. I'm going to go ahead and end my slides there. Just want to recognize a bunch of folks who helped me with the projects and work that I just shared with you. And I will hand things back to Adrian.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben, and thanks for a great presentation, everybody, Andrew and Matt. And so before we have our presenters address your questions, just like to remind you, we love your feedback. Please take a few moments to complete our webinar survey that you see on your screen there. And now we're going to take some time for questions. And I think we'll probably take a little extra time for questions since our presentations were so great and took a good amount of time. So I'm seeing a lot of great questions coming in, and I'm seeing a lot of questions on some similar themes. So I'm going to condense a few questions into a first idea here. And this is something that, like Matt, you mentioned that how the skills needed to work in food safety in the food industry are different today from what they were 10 years ago, and certainly very different from 20 or 30 years ago. And I think that kind of speaks to the idea of, and this question is for everybody, whoever would like to chime in with their thoughts, please do. So how would you all recommend that companies tackle training for digital tools for, different generations or skill levels of employees, and especially those employees who aren't digital natives or maybe who aren't as comfortable or skilled with using new technologies? Anybody want to jump in?
I'm happy to go first, but I imagine that both Andrew and Ben have some good feelings about this as well. A key thing that we always talk about in education is teaching people where they're at, not where we want them to be. And I think we've got to make sure that any training we give is relevant It's not sort of generic tick the box sort of activities where the learners don't understand what it means to them or how it works for them, but instead, where possible, to try to make that training on the job with the specific tools that they would actually be using, and explain not only how to use them, but what it does, why it's effective, why it's needed. Often the most effective training occurs when people understand what they're learning and why, and where they can apply it directly to their everyday work. So I think the key thing there for me would be making sure that where possible, the training actually occurs not in a sort of a tick the box kind of, everyone sits around a screen and watches a presentation, but instead actually has that hands-on, very specific, very site-specific element involved.
Great, thanks, Matt. Any additional thoughts, Andrew or Ben?
I think largely training on systems, whether it's someone who's on the front lines who is operating sensors or is looking at maybe daily thresholds versus someone in management who's looking at trends. I think there's a different level of focus needed on that. We, in one of our pilots around temperature management, we work here with our on-campus dining facilities. We found that the biggest trade-off for individuals who had been doing paper-based tracking to this was they felt relieved that they didn't have to write things down. Like that it felt very much like busy work when we interviewed individuals about it. Like they didn't often understand why, or I write this down and nothing happens. Like it might be out of compliance, but no one's tracking, no one's coming behind. So integrating that into the training, I think, is really important, is how and why this system, whatever we're asking you to use now, from a frontline individual, is going to make your job easier, and that it's being used. Like, because there is an innate feeling of value for individuals if they know that the work that they're doing matters. And that's what, truthfully, we were seeing with the paper-based systems, is they didn't feel that work mattered because it wasn't going anywhere. And so to me, incorporating that why and that there's a value into the training is very key.
Great, thanks, Ben. Okay, so I'm going to toss out a question for Andrew, because I know this is something that you spoke about a bit in your talk at the beginning. So if a company is a small scale food operation and it has, let's say a limited budget and limited IT support, what's the best way for a company with those resources to start transitioning to digital systems? Wait, I think you're muted, Andrew.
In answer to the question, I think it's about involving people early in the discussions, and then getting their input on steps in moving forward. And then those discussions can be reflected on and influence any decisions around training issues, the level of commitment to digital technology, what sort of technology is available, and what level of expertise that they need to buy in to make this work.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, here's a really good question. I'm going to throw it out to Ben. So if a digitization of food safety management system would require major changes to the organization systems, what would you recommend as the starting point in the introduction of this change in the organization?
That's a great broad question. To me, I think it's important to get buy-in from operations first. that there are efficiencies that are possible with implementing a system, because ultimately I think from our committee work, we interviewed a number of IT specialists from major chains and brands throughout the U.S. They highlighted a number of barriers that were technology barriers that they were the gatekeepers for, that I didn't really get until we got into our committee work. And so having operations, having IT on board, and being able to make the case that these systems are, very important for food safety. That's ultimately why we're doing it, but are leading to operational efficiency within the business. To me, that's a starting point. If the question, so that's the way I interpreted the question. But Adrian, if the question was about like what type of sensors or where would I start, like, do we go with thermometers and temperatures versus whatever? I would say try to figure out where you have the biggest problem in compliance internally. So if it's like temperature logs, then start there to take a pain point away, as opposed to I would suggest doing that as opposed to like the proverbial low hanging fruit. Oh, we're already doing this really well. If we did it digitally, it would be even more efficient. I would not suggest doing that. I'd do it the other way.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, both answers, depending on which way you read the question, are really sage advice. So thanks, Ben, for kind of like looking at that from two different angles. Very helpful indeed. We're going to take a few minutes just to do a couple more questions here. Thanks to those who are hanging on for the extended Q&A. So another attendee has a question about the use of digital data management systems for auditing purposes, and whether that's to demonstrate, the record of compliance to a regulatory authority or to a potential customer. And does the panel have any thoughts on digital systems for auditing purposes?
I'll jump in quick. I love it. I kind of made some comments in my thoughts about this. I think the data, being able to share data to make an audit or an inspection more fruitful is very, very key. I'm not sure exactly where auditors and inspectors are on this right now. I think that's a challenge, but to me, that's really where we should be going and aiming for.
Okay, great. Any other ideas from Rusty? Okay. We'll go on to another question. I thought this one was a little bit interesting because it's kind of a different angle than we specifically addressed in the webinar, but it has to do with the introduction and implementation of digital technologies. So if you have things like computers, iPads, sensors, other things that you're installing as part of digital management systems, what kind of considerations do you need to look at for keeping that equipment clean, or kind of like integrating that into a sanitation plan? Because that's new equipment, new devices. Obviously, some of them are going to have cleaning concerns. Some of that equipment you might not be able to get wet. Anybody have any thoughts on that at all from like kind of a physical perspective? Anybody? If not, we can move on to another question.
No, I do. Sorry, I'm giving everybody space. I feel like I'm jumping in on all the answers here, but this is also something that we talked about in the Conference for Food Protection report a little bit. Is that's a like a foundational principle, right? Anything that we're adding into the system can't be a harbor for contamination, and so whether that's physical, chemical, or microbiological, it doesn't really matter. But that is something that I feel like the industry partners who are working to develop these systems have on their mind, because they're also doing other types of sensors that do touch food or whatever. So I think it's absolutely paramount. And needs to be part of the decision making for anyone who's going to jump into this world.
Great. Thank you, Ben. And all right, so I'm going to go ahead and give a last question here. And this is another topic that we saw a few different attendees had questions on. And while we didn't specifically really address the use of AI in this webinar, as we know, AI is an aspect or can be an aspect of a tool that you would use within a digital system. And so the attendees were wondering things like, where might it be helpful, such as spotting trends before humans in, things like maybe, what the data is telling you, what alarms are telling you, things like that. But then also, how much human input or control should we need to have when we're incorporating AI into digital food safety management systems? Any general thoughts on those types of questions from the panel?
I might quickly jump in there. Thanks, Adrian. So I think, AI is happening. It's certainly going to become a bigger and bigger part of all businesses, and I think especially food safety. And so I think we should be utilising it where we can. But ultimately, the liability rests with us. If anything goes wrong, it's not going to be good enough to just say, well, my AI tool didn't detect that trend. And so we do need verification. We do need to be able to check the information ourselves, and we do need to ultimately be giving that final analysis ourselves. So I think it's really critical that we use it as a tool, but that we always remember that ultimate responsibility relies with the human critical and analytical skills within our business.
Yeah, great advice or great guidance. Ben or Andrew, any final thoughts to share?
Nothing to add to Matt's comments.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Look, I just Matthew covered it well. I think with AI, we need to challenge a lot of the information and the critical thinking is required in looking at trends, analysing trends, and trying to resolve food safety issues. AI is a great tool, but I think we need to challenge it and make sure that we make the right decisions. As Matt said, ultimately, us humans are responsible.
Yeah, great points. And, certainly as AI applications continue to evolve, we'll see more things that can be used in the food safety realm. And then that will not only provide more opportunities, more challenges. So definitely an area to keep a close eye on. So I want to thank all of you again. That was a great discussion. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. We took a little extra time for questions. I'm glad we did. We had a lot of great questions. But please join me once again thanking Andrew, Matt, and Ben for their presentations. Now, if you have any additional questions or comments, don't hesitate to click that email us button on the console, and we'll share them with our presenters so that they can respond directly to you. And if you didn't have a chance to fill it out earlier, we'll be redirecting you shortly to the post-event survey. And we do always look forward to hearing how we can make our programs work better for you. So please feel free to fill that out. Also, please make sure to visit food-safety.com/webinars for the archive of this presentation. You can share that with your colleagues as well as information about our other upcoming events. And then also please save the date for our annual Food Safety Summit from May 11th through the 14th, 2026 in Rosemont, Illinois. It'll give you the opportunity to connect with your peers, learn from, and network with leading subject matter experts and so much more. Registration for the 2026 Summit's now open, so you can click that Food Safety Summit logo on the bottom right of the console for more information. And as a thank you for being a valuable webinar attendee, we would like to offer you 10% off of your registration. You can use the code webinar25, altogether, webinar25 at checkout. So we appreciate your time. We hope you found this webinar to be a valuable experience. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.